They laughed at the black girl with braids until her story made everyone cry. Nice hair, Keisha. You get those braids from a dollar store? The hallway exploded with laughter. Keisha stopped mid-step, clutching her notebook to her chest. Her eyes darted to the floor, anywhere but their faces. 3 girls stood near the lockers, their nails glossy, their smiles sharp like knives. One of them, Vanessa, the queen of the hallway, walked up and tugged on one of Keisha's braids. You really walked in here thinking that was cute? Keisha jerked her head back, her heart pounding. Please don't touch my hair. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh, relax. We're just joking. Why so sensitive? But Keisha could hear the whispers spreading down the hallway. Look at her hair. She always smells like she uses coconut oil. Her mom probably braided it in their kitchen. She wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. As the crowd thinned, she walked quietly to her locker. Her fingers trembled as she twisted one braid around her finger, the same braids her mother had stayed up till midnight doing. Don't let nobody tell you these ain't beautiful, her mama had said, smiling. They carry your roots, baby. Your story, Keisha blinked back tears. If only Mama was here to say that now. At lunch, she sat alone, pretending to scroll through her phone while everyone else laughed and talked. The boys at the next table snickered. Yo, look, Ropehead over there again. She flinched but didn't look up. That's when a voice from across the room said, Leave her alone. Everyone turned. It was Mr. Daniels, the English teacher. Tall, calm, his voice carrying quiet authority. He walked over, set his tray beside hers, and sat down. Keisha looked at him in shock. You don't have to. He smiled gently. I know, but sometimes sitting down speaks louder than standing up. For the first time that day, Keisha smiled faintly. Mr. Daniels looked at her braids and said, You know, my sister used to wear her hair just like that when she marched in college. She said every braid held a story of strength. Her eyes filled with tears. People here don't see that, he nodded. They will. But sometimes people need to cry before they can see clearly. She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But something in his voice felt like hope. Because one day soon, those same kids who laughed at her would listen to her story, and none of them would leave the room the same. The next morning, Keisha stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The same braids, the same brown skin, the same tired eyes. But now, there was something new in her. A quiet question whispering inside her heart. Why am I letting them define me? She picked up her brush, then set it down. She didn't touch her braids. Her mama's voice echoed again in her head. These braids carry your story, baby. If you hide them, you hide yourself. Keisha took a breath and whispered, Then I'm not hiding anymore. At school, the laughter started again. As she walked through the hall, someone muttered, Here comes Rope Girl. Another voice snickered, Don't trip over your own hair. But this time, Keisha didn't look down. She just kept walking, Vanessa noticed. Oh, so now you think you're better than us, she said, stepping into Keisha's path. Keisha looked her right in the eye. No, I just finally know I'm not less. The hallway went silent. For a second, no one knew what to say. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard, then scoffed and turned away. Whatever. But that one small moment, that one line, was the first time Keisha didn't feel small. That afternoon, Mr. Daniels called her to stay after class. You all right, Keisha? He asked gently. She nodded. Better than yesterday, he smiled. Good, I want to tell you something. Next week is our school's annual storytelling event. Every student can share a personal story. You ever thought about it? Keisha froze. Me? Oh no. Nobody wants to hear my story. He leaned forward. You'd be surprised. Sometimes the stories people ignore the most are the ones they need to hear. She looked down at her hands. I wouldn't even know what to say. He smiled. Start with the truth. That night she sat on her bed with her notebook open. The page was blank. Her heart wasn't. She wrote one line. They laughed at my braids before they knew what they meant, and once she started, she couldn't stop. Tears blurred her words as she wrote about her mom, her hair, her pain, and how every braid was a piece of her history. When she was done, her hands were shaking, but her soul felt lighter. She whispered to herself, "If I'm gonna cry, it's gonna be for something that matters." She looked at the page again. For the first time, her story had a voice. By the time the school's storytelling event rolled around, Keisha almost backed out twice. Her heart said go, but her fear whispered don't. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, parents, bright lights, cameras. And somewhere near the front row, Vanessa sat with her arms folded, smirking. When the principal called, "Next up, Keisha Brown," the crowd murmured. A few voices snickered. Oh, this should be good. Keisha's palms were slick with sweat. Her notebook shook in her hands. She looked toward the curtain, where Mr. Daniels stood backstage giving her a small nod. She took a breath, deep, slow, then walked out onto the stage. At first, she couldn't see anyone. The lights blinded her. All she could hear was the sound of her heartbeat and the echo of those old words. "You get those braids from a dollar store?" She gripped the microphone tighter. "My name is Keisha Brown," she began softly, her voice trembling. "And I used to hate my hair." The room went still. I hated it because people laughed at me for it. Because they said it looked cheap. Because they said I didn't fit in. But what they didn't know is what these braids mean. She glanced down for a moment, then lifted her head. My mother used to braid my hair every Sunday. She'd hum old church songs while she worked. Sometimes it took hours, but she'd smile and say, "Every braid is a thread to your ancestors. Every twist carries strength." Her voice steadied, stronger now. But when I came to this school, that strength turned into shame. I started wishing my hair was straight. I started wishing I looked like everyone else. Until one day I realized, if I have to erase who I am to belong, then maybe I'm trying to belong in the wrong place. The crowd went silent. Vanessa's smirk had faded. Keisha looked out at the sea of faces. Students who had once laughed at her, now listening like they were hearing her for the first time. "These braids," she said, holding one gently between her fingers. "They're not just hair. They're history. My grandma wore them when she worked in fields. My mom wore them when she worked double shifts. And now, I wear them to remind myself that their strength lives in me." Her eyes shone with tears. "I'm not asking you to love my hair. I'm just asking you to respect the story it tells." A hush swept through the room. Even the teachers blinked back tears, and then, slowly, someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room was on its feet. Keisha's breath caught as the applause filled her chest like light. She looked toward the back of the room and saw Mr. Daniels wiping his eyes, whispering, "Told you they'd cry before they'd understand." When the applause finally faded, Keisha walked off the stage with trembling hands. Her heart was still racing, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was release. Backstage, Mr. Daniels met her with open arms. "You did it, Keisha." She smiled through tears. "They actually listened." He nodded. "They didn't just listen. They felt you." The rest of the assembly felt like a blur. Students whispered her name in the halls that afternoon. Not as a joke, but with a strange kind of respect. "Did you hear her speech? She made me cry. I didn't even know she was that deep." But one face stood out in the crowd. Vanessa, the same girl who had once grabbed her braids, laughing. Now she looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her own words had finally hit her. When the final bell rang, Keisha was at her locker packing her books when Vanessa appeared beside her. For a long moment, neither said anything. Then Vanessa whispered, "Can we talk?" They walked outside, behind the gym, where the sound of the wind filled the silence between them. Vanessa fidgeted with her nails. "Look, about what I said, about your hair and everything, I was wrong." Keisha looked at her quietly, unsure what to say. Vanessa took a deep breath. "I laughed at you because everyone else did. Because it made me feel better about myself. But when you talked up there," her voice cracked, "you made me realize I've been the kind of person I never wanted to be." Keisha's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment 100 times. The apology, the tears, the vindication. But now that it was real, she didn't feel angry. She felt sad. "You hurt me, Vanessa," she said softly. "Every time you laughed, it made me wish I was invisible." Vanessa nodded, eyes glistening. "I know, and I can't take it back. But I'm sorry. I really am." Keisha looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You can't change the past. But you can start using your voice differently now." Vanessa blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've got influence," Keisha said. "People listen to you, so start saying something worth hearing." Vanessa's lip trembled. "I don't deserve forgiveness," Keisha smiled faintly. "Neither did I deserve the hate. But here we are." For the first time, Vanessa smiled back. Small, fragile, but real. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Keisha felt lighter. The same hallway that once echoed with laughter now felt like a different world. Not because everyone changed overnight, but because she had. Mr. Daniel's words returned to her mind. Sometimes people need to cry before they can see clearly. Now she understood. The ones who had laughed weren't bad, they were blind. And now, for the first time, their eyes were opening. By Monday morning, something strange was happening. Keisha walked into school and froze. Everywhere she looked, in the halls, in classrooms, even the cafeteria, there were girls wearing braids. Long ones, short ones, colored ones. She blinked in disbelief. What is this?" Jasmine, one of the quiet girls from her math class, ran up to her, smiling. "You started this, girl." "Started what?" Keisha asked. "The Braid Day Challenge." Jasmine laughed. "Somebody posted a clip of your speech on TikTok. It went viral. You got like 2 million views." Keisha's eyes widened. "You're joking." "Nope," Jasmine said, pulling out her phone. "Look." The video showed Keisha on stage, voice trembling but strong. "If I have to erase who I am to belong, then I'm trying to belong in the wrong place." The comments below were flooded with hearts and crying emojis. Braids Are Beautiful was trending. People were sharing their own photos, their own stories, their own roots. By lunchtime, girls from other schools started showing up at Keisha's campus, all wearing braids. One girl hugged her and said through tears, "They used to laugh at me, too. But after hearing you, I walked in proud today." Keisha didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled. I just told my story." Mr. Daniel, standing nearby, smiled proudly. And that's how every movement starts. Later that week, the local news called. Then a journalist. Then a community group. Soon, Keisha was invited to speak at a youth event downtown. She stood behind the curtain, peeking out at the crowd. Hundreds of young people, many with braids, twists, or natural curls. Her stomach twisted with nerves. Vanessa walked up beside her. "Nervous?" Keisha chuckled softly. "You have no idea," Vanessa smiled. "You got this. You're the reason we're all here." Keisha looked at her, the same girl who once mocked her, now standing beside her as a friend. It made her heart ache in the best way. When she walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. This time, she didn't tremble. She looked at them, every face, every smile, every braid, and said, "They used to laugh at me because they didn't understand my story. Now they're writing their own." The crowd cheered. Some cried. Some held up signs that said, "My hair, my story." Keisha smiled through tears. The laughter that once broke her heart had become the sound that built her purpose. That night, as she sat on her bed, scrolling through hundreds of messages from girls around the world, she whispered, "Mama, you were right. These braids do carry our stories." And for the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt infinite. 2 weeks later, Keisha's life looked nothing like it used to. Every time she opened her phone, new messages flooded in. News reporters, magazines, even celebrities reposting her video. One morning, she scrolled through Instagram and froze. A famous actress had written, "To every girl with braids, this young queen speaks for us all." Her jaw dropped. "Mr. Daniels is never going to believe this," she whispered. At school, people treated her differently. The same hallways that once echoed with laughter now echoed with respect. Even the teachers looked at her with pride. But fame didn't make her proud. It made her grateful. Because behind all the attention, she still saw her mama's face in her mind, smiling through tired eyes, whispering, "Your story will open hearts one day, baby." And now it was happening. That Friday, her school principal stopped her between classes. "Keisha, there's someone who wants to meet you," she frowned. "Who?" He smiled. "Come with me." They walked to the auditorium. Inside, the lights were dim except for one stage light. Sitting near the front row was an older woman with silver braids and deep, kind eyes. "Keisha," the principal said softly, "this is Mrs. Janine Foster, founder of Voices United, a youth organization. She's seen your video." The woman stood, smiling warmly. "I didn't just see it, child. I felt it." Keisha blinked, stunned. "You did?" Mrs. Foster nodded. "When I was your age, I was sent home from school for wearing braids. They called it unprofessional. I spent years fighting to be heard. But hearing you," she paused, eyes misting. "Hearing you reminded me why we fought in the first place." Keisha's chest tightened. "I didn't mean to start anything big." The woman smiled gently. "The loudest changes start from quiet pain." Mrs. Foster handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter that said, "You are invited to speak at the National Youth Empowerment Summit, Washington, D.C." Keisha gasped. "Me? I can't." "Yes, you can," Mrs. Foster said. "You don't need a polished voice, child. You just need your truth. That's what the world listens to." That night, Keisha sat in her room staring at the invitation. Her old notebook lay open beside her, the one where she'd written, "They laughed at my braids before they knew what they meant." She ran her fingers over the words and whispered, "I guess they'll know now." She looked up at the photo of her mom on the wall, smiling, braiding her hair years ago, and whispered softly, "Mama, they're listening." And outside her window, the wind carried that promise like a prayer. Far, far beyond her small town, the plane touched down in Washington, D.C. just after sunrise. Keisha pressed her face against the window, watching the city lights fade into gold. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from something bigger. Purpose. Mrs. Foster smiled from the seat beside her. "You ready, baby girl?" Keisha swallowed hard. "I don't know if anyone's ever really ready for something like this." Mrs. Foster chuckled softly. "Then don't be ready. Be real. That's what the world needs." By noon, the National Youth Empowerment Summit was packed. Hundreds of people filled the auditorium: students, teachers, journalists, activists. Posters on the wall read, "Our Voices Matter," in bold letters. Keisha stood backstage, clutching the same notebook she'd written in months ago, the one filled with tears, pain, and truth. Her palms were sweaty, her throat dry. Vanessa had flown in too, sitting in the audience right behind Mrs. Foster and Mr. Daniels, both smiling with pride. The host's voice echoed across the hall. "Please welcome our next speaker, Miss Keisha Brown." The applause was thunderous. Keisha stepped out into the bright light. For a split second the noise faded. All she could hear was her mother's voice. "Every braid is a thread to your ancestors. Every twist carries strength." She touched one braid lightly, then looked out at the crowd. "My name is Keisha Brown," she began, her voice calm, strong. "And I used to wish I could cut off the very thing that made me who I am." The room went still. "I used to hate my hair," she continued. "Not because it was ugly, but because people made me believe it was. They laughed. They whispered. They told me I'd never belong." Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't stop. "I carried that shame like a secret. I tried to change myself to fit a world that never wanted to understand me. But the day I stopped hiding was the day I found my voice." She took a deep breath and smiled softly. "These braids," she said, lifting one between her fingers, "aren't just hair. They're history. They carry my mother's prayers, my grandmother's courage, and every black girl's right to love herself without apology." A murmur swept through the crowd. Soft sniffles, quiet tears. She looked up, eyes glistening. So to every girl who's ever been laughed at for how she looks, remember this: what they mock today might be what they admire tomorrow. Because beauty isn't something you fit into. It's something that fits inside you. When she finished, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, a single clap echoed, then another, until the whole audience was on their feet, clapping, crying, cheering. Mr. Daniels stood, wiping his eyes. Vanessa was crying openly. Even the reporters lowered their cameras, overwhelmed by emotion. Keisha smiled through tears, and for the first time, she felt her mother's presence beside her, not in memory, but in spirit. She whispered softly, "Mama, your voice made it here." The crowd's applause swelled louder, but Keisha didn't need it anymore, because the world had finally heard what her heart had been trying to say all along. Weeks passed after the summit, but Keisha's words never faded. Clips of her speech spread across social media, news channels, and classrooms. Teachers began showing it in schools. Mothers played it for their daughters. And little girls everywhere stood in front of mirrors, running their fingers proudly through their braids. Her inbox overflowed. Messages from girls in Africa, the Caribbean, London, and across America. "I wore my braids to school for the first time today. They laughed at me once, but not anymore. You helped me see my hair as a crown, not a curse." Every time Keisha read one, her eyes filled with tears. She'd never wanted fame. She just wanted peace. But her story had become something far bigger than she ever imagined. One afternoon, as she walked through her neighborhood, she noticed something that made her stop. Outside the old barbershop where she used to hide after bad days, a mural had been painted on the wall. It showed a young black girl with shining braids. Strong, proud, head held high. Beneath it, in bold white letters, were the words, "She spoke, and the world listened." Keisha stared at it, speechless. A group of little girls nearby were pointing at the mural, laughing and smiling. One said, "I want to be like her." And that's when it hit Keisha. She was them once. She walked closer, touched the painted braid, and whispered, "It's all for you, Mama." That evening, she was invited to appear on national television. When the interviewer asked, "Keisha, how does it feel to be a global voice for change?" she smiled softly and said, "I'm not the voice. I'm just the echo of every woman who came before me." The audience went quiet. Her eyes glistened as she continued. "My mother braided strength into my hair. My grandmother braided hope. I just carried it forward. If my story made people cry, it's because they finally saw the beauty in what they were taught to laugh at." The interviewer wiped a tear. "That's powerful, Keisha." She smiled faintly. "It's not power, it's truth." That night, back home, Keisha sat by her window as the city lights flickered below. She undid one braid slowly, letting the strands fall through her fingers. Each one felt like a chapter, a victory, a memory. She whispered softly. "They laughed at the black girl with braids, but my braids became my wings." Outside, the wind blew gently, carrying her words into the night. The same wind that once carried her mother's voice. And somewhere out there, another girl would hear it, look in the mirror, and realize she was never less. She was limitless. The end moral. Message: they laughed because they didn't understand. But when truth speaks through pain, it silences mockery. Every braid, every scar, every story is proof that beauty lives in the courage to be yourself.